Hi, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. On what better program than This is America could we bring together a group of important and influential guests to try to define what it means to be an American. Our guests include Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonin Scalia, Yale Law School Professor Kenji Yoshino, syndicated newspaper columnist Mona Charen, John Podesta, President of the Center for American Progress, Janet Murguia, the President of the National Council of La Raza, and Reg Weaver, President of the National Education Association. American Identity and the American Experience next. This is America. This is America is made possible by Hyundai Motor America, maker of the 2007 Sonata. The National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. The city of Paducah, Kentucky, located in McCracken County, home of the Paducah Artist Relocation Program. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The CTC Foundation, and the American Life TV Network. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin the festivities tonight, thank you all for joining in on this incredibly exciting topic of trying to define what it means to be an American. In front of you, a card and some writing implement, black pens, I think, are in front of you. Before we start the conversation, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. Just do a quick free association amongst yourselves, to yourself, by yourself. First of all, when I say the word America, what comes to your mind? Just jot it down. Anything is fair game. What word comes to mind when you think of America? All righty. Okay. Second one, just keep moving right along. What characteristic comes to your mind to describe Americans, if you kind of synthesize it in one word? Okay. All right. The third question would be, what do you think is America's greatest asset or value? You didn't know it was going to be a pop quiz to start with. And the last question, okay? What do you think is America's greatest shortcoming or failure? Let me start by, so we got the questions on the table. What word comes to mind when you think of America? What characteristic comes to mind to describe Americans? Let's tackle those two for openers. America and Americans. Kind of an interesting point in our history to find out who we are, where we're going. Mona, why don't you start us off? What did you come up with?
Well, let's see. For number one, what did you get? My first response was ordered liberty. That's the outstanding feature about America, at least for me, this experiment in ordered liberty that's been going on for more than 200 years. Whether it will continue another 200 is an open question.
Okay.
I said that I think Americans are entrepreneurial, a great source of our strength.
Okay, let's hold on those two.
Okay,
let's tackle those two first. Justice Scalia?
Well, maybe I'm more plebeian. When you said America, you wanted free association. My home. You know, land of the Pilgrim's Pride, land of my father's. How does it go?
We'll all sing it together at the end of the program. Huh?
Well, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
And how about the characteristic of Americans? Is it one word that jumps out?
Oh, this is the second one. It's close to Mona's. I'd say independence. They're independent people.
Okay. Kenji, why don't you just follow suit, huh?
Absolutely, and it's very much in that suit, and that I actually put down freedom. I like ordered liberty better, though. I like the modifier there. I also put down life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In terms of, and I say I like Mona's better because I think that there's a balance implied there, and I think that we're also a nation of balance, that part of our liberalism is that we try and balance competing interests against each other and try to come up with something that is in the common good. And in terms of a characteristic, I wrote down individualism. And so I think that it's, again, very much in the same vein.
Okay, Reg, why don't you jump in?
Well, I had a U.S. citizen. When I think about American, that's the first thing that comes to my mind, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. In my mindset, it's a U.S. citizen. And a caring nation and a caring people is what I had for number 2. I think Americans are extremely caring people.
John?
Land of opportunity,
Yeah.
where just people can better themselves. And I said the characteristic I think of as Americans, distinct, I think, from other people, we're really an optimistic people.
Yeah.
That we can tackle the biggest challenges and get things done.
And we do tackle big things. Jen?
Sure. I had freedom and liberty for number 1, and I feel like that captures so much. I agree with Justice Scalia, though. I think about it as being home, you know, and so much of what we connotate is America and the American dream. So that pursuit of the American dream, having that opportunity. So all of the words that you've heard here, I think, are captured in the American dream.
I want to talk about American dream a little later, but I want to ask Justice Scalia, when they sat down and got the country off and running, Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights, what did the framers have in mind? And have we kind of lived up to their billing from the get-go?
I think they had in mind pretty much what we've come up with. One of the features of our common American culture is that you don't have to be in the common culture. I think the framers understood that. George Washington's famous letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, which tells them, you know, you're welcome here. You're as American as anybody else. Although they were doubtless, you know, in that what was in those days an overwhelmingly Christian nation, you know, not in the common cultural tie. But that didn't matter. You can be part of what is America is allowing a lot of people to be outside of the common stream.
Mona, you're shaking your head.
Yeah,
Just
well,
jump
as
into the
opposed to Europe, where that really was not true. I mean, if you were, it wasn't comfortable to be a Huguenot in France. You know, it wasn't comfortable to be a Catholic in England, and that was one of the things that our founders were very eager to, you know, set aside and make us different. And it's one of the great beauties. I mean, I actually find that letter that Washington wrote to the Jews of Rhode Island to be, you can choke up when you read it because it's so beautiful. You know, he said, where every man will be free to sit under his tree and there'll be none to make them afraid.
Some
it's
say the
beautiful.
rabbi wrote it.
Janet, you're
If so, nothing's changed. You know, it's still.
you're shaking your head.
No, I just didn't get to give my second answer, but the second answer was diversity. And I know different people interpret it differently, but I mean, it's along the lines of what Justice Scalia spoke about. You have the free to be inside the core, outside the core, but it's the variances, the differences that we can represent here in this country and be able to live together.
Absolutely. When you think about this country and you think about the diversity that exists here and how great this country is, and it's great because of that diversity. And oftentimes, I don't know if, in fact, we take the opportunity to celebrate it and recognize it to the extent that we should. And if in fact it were not for that diversity, then you look around this table and many of us would not be here.
John, go ahead.
Well, I think that Reg is onto something, which is that openness, the ability to bring people who will strive, who will better themselves, who will better the country in the process, who will find the common good, has been the greatest source of strength for our country, that it can kind of take all comers and find the best in them, and by that, I think, push all of us to a higher level. And I think, as I said,
You're beginning.
Beginning what?
diversity alone is not what makes a great nation. I mean, diversity alone makes some of the tribal societies of the world that never quite make it, such as some of the places in the Middle East where we're trying to establish nationhood. As I said earlier, it's part of our tradition that everybody can be an American, but there has been a common culture.
Yeah,
you don't have to belong to it, but there has been that. And
what is it? What is it? What is it?
Well, okay, you want to know what it is, number one? Okay.
Is there a bond? Is there a common culture?
I think, well, let me tell you a story. My junior year of college, I studied in Switzerland, and I used to get really annoyed when the French-Swiss professors I had would refer constantly to les pays anglo-saxons, the Anglo-Saxon countries, meaning England, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, okay, Canada. And I said, you know, hey, my name is Scalia, and I'm as American as anybody. Look at this face. Is this an Anglo-Saxon face? I had never been in England, but at the end of my year, I went to England, and I felt at home. There is no doubt that American culture, American common culture, which nobody has to belong to, originates with English culture. And that includes Shakespeare, it includes nursery rhymes that we all know and that we use as examples. That's our common culture. And I think the framers recognized that. Diversity's fine, but diversity does not make a nation.
And diversity at the expense of the common culture is too often what we have now. It's what's in fashion now. It's what's in school books. You know, this notion that...
Well, how are we going to define diversity? How are we going to define that for the sake of this conversation?
Well, in the context in which I'm describing it, the way the school textbooks writers define it, it means that they have to hire kids who are actually able-bodied to pose in wheelchairs for photographs to appear in textbooks, because being handicapped is considered part of diversity now. And so you have to have a handicapped kid and a black kid and a white kid and a Jewish kid and an American Indian kid and so on and so forth. And nobody can be shown doing anything that is regarded as traditional. So you cannot have an Irish kid, you know, not kid, an Irish adult in the role of a policeman, because that's stereotyping.
Are we not talking about different groups of people who are in the United States? I mean, isn't that what we're talking about when we talk about diversity? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Kenji, don't go away on me. Come on, jump into this conversation, huh?
Well, I guess I was just sort of stuck here because I'm teaching I was sort of convicted by my own job in the sense that I'm teaching a class on Shakespeare right now. So, I have a great love of Shakespeare.
That's what I was saying.
And I also want to say that I'm enjoying it, and this is a return to my own roots in the sense that Shakespeare was my major. I was a Shakespeare fanatic in college, and I think that I was a con law fanatic in law school, and so I think that I am drawn to the core texts of our society. But at the same time, I want to sort of pull against that a little, what the Justice was saying, what Mona, you were saying as well, in the sense that, I mean, it always has to be a balance, right? So you were saying ordered liberty, and I actually, you were looking at the Justice's, you know, crib sheet. I wanted to look at your crib sheet, because I think that was a better formulation of the ideal that I was striving for, in the sense that it's always going to be a balance between these two. But the other society that I have great experience of is Japan. In Japan, you have all of the order and very little of the liberty, right? So, I mean, when I listen to the canon wars in the United States, there's something almost comical about whether or not something should be in or out of the canon. Because if you, at least when I was in Japan and going through grade school there, there was a textbook assigned by the Ministry of Education that was the same from the northernmost tip of Hokkaido to the southernmost tip of, you know, Kyushu, you know, and everyone was turning the same page at the same time. So when you turned your page, you could hear, you know, the pages of like millions of school children turning with you, you know. So the idea that we would actually have a canon that's broader than that is really important to me. So I want to say that we're much more free than Japan is, but I think that in some ways it's like we can actually take the excesses of liberty I actually feel like we have a great deal of order in this society right now. And maybe you don't disagree with that, but I think that you're focusing on the excesses rather than on the actual kind of hopeful things that diversity can bring to us.
Let me drop this into the table. Somewhere in mid-October, we will become a nation of 300 million Americans. How did this young country get so big so quickly? Immigration, longevity, relatively high birth rate, and economic stability. The nation has added 100 million people since 1967 to become the world's third most populous country after China and India. Now, this is the part that kind of interests me. The biggest driver of growth is immigration, legal and illegal. About 53% of the 100 million extra Americans are recent immigrants or their descendants. The newcomers have transformed an overwhelmingly white population of largely European descent into a multicultural society that reflects every continent on the globe. Isn't that what we're talking about when we talk about diversity?
Yeah, I want to jump in. I think that the Justice and Mona were worried we were kind of wandering into political correctness, but I think what we were saying, I think on this side of the table, was that the strength really comes from the capacity to take what's best of people who are willing to work hard, the entrepreneurship, the willingness, the openness to accept people who can, start from nothing and succeed in this country the way I think, at least up until recently, you didn't see in many other cultures around the globe. And I think that is partly a question of the freedom to pursue those dreams, but it's also partly a culture that was willing to accept and be open to people from around the world.
Is that the culture thing we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so, and I think we do
Acceptance?
have a common culture, but I guess I would disagree with the Justice in one sense, which is that while it may have its roots in a common Anglo-Saxon culture, if you will, it draws upon cultures from people all over the world, and I think it's richer, and it creates a kind of a better stew
right
as a
before
result.
our very eyes?
Oh, I don't disagree with that, of course.
Is it changing right before our very eyes?
I doubt that it's changing as much as some people think it's changing.
Is that right?
Yeah, because I think new waves of immigrants, just like the old ones, realize that that the easiest course to success is to join the mainstream. And I think every immigrant wants his or her children to speak English, for example, to be educated the way the typical American is educated. I don't think that's going to change.
Janet, let me just ask you to weigh in. But one thing I read in a speech or a paper that you put together with one of your colleagues, Cecilia, was that when people come to the United States as immigrants, and I guess this is true today as it was way back then, the first generation, they speak in their own native language.
Still dominant, yeah.
The second generation, they kind of speak bilingual. One at home and another on the street.
But they're fully bilingual.
Right, and then the third generation, they're speaking...
That's right.
They forget their...
They don't know the old language.
That's right. But
their grandparents cry.
Listen, in my case, I'm the second generation, and I don't speak Italian.
I'm first generation, but I think that's the point, is that I think the Justice is right. There's a lot of fear right now that a lot of this immigrant population are creating, different cultures, and that they're not part of that common culture. The reality couldn't be further from the truth. These folks are hungry to learn English.
What do you see as the common thread of the common culture that you talk about? When you say that we have a common...
I think about it in terms of values.
Values.
I think that there's a strong sense of optimism. The words you heard about what people believe in this country, and the fact that they have a sense of optimism, I think there's a lot of hard work. I think that people believe in a sense of family, a sense of community, if you will, helping one another.
Let's go to those those other two questions. What do you think is America's greatest asset or value, and which is what you've stumbled into, and what do you think is our greatest shortcoming? So talk about those values.
Well, its greatest asset is its people. There's no question to me that...
That's what I have.
That's what I have, too.
For the record, me too. Justice Scalia is happy about it. help you out with that.
Get all these people.
We find agreement. The fact is
We find agreement. That's why we came together.
Our greatest asset is our people.
Is our people. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Everybody?
Absolutely.
Reg?
For me, the diversity rests within the people.
Good point.
Within the people or within the groups, the subgroups?
Within the
the
people. Within the people. The people
Talk
who make,
about that a little
the
bit
people
more.
who make up America. When we're talking about people that are yearning to be free, we're talking about people that want to be a part of something that they see as great, something that they see as good. And any way that they feel as though that they can become a part, if they feel that they work hard, if they feel as though they do some sacrificing, they can reach the American dream. And regardless of groups, regardless of people, I do believe that most everybody is searching for the American dream. People are reaching for the American dream. But how do they do that? In many instances, it's easier for some than it is for others. And so we do have people that are constantly coming to this country, regardless of when the time they started to come. You look at why people wanted to come to America.
Why did they want to come? Why did they want to come?
Why did they want to come?
Yeah.
Let me check. This has to be in the discussion, as difficult as it may be. Of course, they originally came for religious reasons.
Freedom.
And I think that is one of the features of America that should not be minimized. We are, as a Supreme Court opinion said in the 1950s, we are a religious people whose institutions presuppose a supreme being. This was William O. Douglas, not me. And I think that's very true. It's one of the great differences between America and Europe. We are, if you know, I think I saw statistics the other day. Something like 85% of Americans believe in God. And you wouldn't find that in Europe. I think it is part of our national tradition, and that doesn't mean, once again, that everybody has to be in the mainstream, but that is the mainstream.
Freedom of religion, freedom to worship as you so choose.
Not just freedom to worship, but a general belief in
A strong
God.
sense of faith.
A strong
Yes, a strong sense of faith.
And being able to speak, to be able to speak freely.
Speaking freely.
That is absolutely.
One of the ways that immigrants become Americans also is that they adopt our history as their history. So that there's no sense that you have to be ethnically anything in particular to be an American, but it's very moving to watch, kids from, every society around the world who can quote Lincoln, who are familiar with the Federalist Papers, who know about what the phrase "Remember the Maine" is all about. When you've done that, when you've successfully conveyed the history of this country, you've created another generation of Americans.
Should they adopt our history as their history?
Yes.
Reg,
Yes.
you have 15 seconds or 15 hours for a rebuttal, one or the other.
But see, I think sometimes if, in fact, the expectation is that they forget everything or everything that speaks to who they are and what they are, and then adopt something else, I think that's what I would not like to see. I think there's room to keep who I am and also be able to identify
You're
and
setting
bring
up
into.
who you are against your being an American? Why is there a contradiction between those two?
No, I don't see that.
Kenji is about to weigh in on the subject, having written extensively on the
Have you
topic.
written on this topic?
I have written on the topic.
He has written extensively
Why
on the
didn't you
topic.
say so?
He's saying so right now.
Yeah, I was waiting for Dennis to ask.
What is the person, the being, is there a hierarchy as far as personhood and Americanhood?
Well, I don't think there necessarily has to be, but I think that the way that it has played out historically, that it often has been. I think that we need to be very careful about that, and I think this goes back again to the idea of balance. So what I've written about is how assimilation has just been really double-edged in American history, that sometimes it's been a leveling force and sometimes it's been a subordinating force. So the idea of the melting pot is a very deeply held American one, but all of us on this side of the table at least said individualism was another one. And I think that those two are constantly in tension with each other, and that tension is really, really productive and helpful.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it would be stupid for me to come in and say I'm against all forms of assimilation, because for me to be speaking English in a suit at this table is, multiple forms of assimilation. Being assimilated as part of being a civilized human being. But I think that we need to be mindful of the fact that there are certain forms of assimilation that are more troubling than others. So, if we think about, Anna Quinlan just wrote this thing in Newsweek that I was talking to one of her producers about earlier, where she was talking about how when 50 years ago, if the opportunities available to women had been what they had been 50 years ago, she would have been a mad housewife. And now she's using her words for a different purpose and to type up her boyfriend's papers. She's using the words from her own mouth, And I think that if we actually think about a form of assimilation that said you have to assimilate into a 1950s model of the household where women don't work, then Anna Quinlan wouldn't have been able to be Anna Quinlan, and there would be people at this table who wouldn't be able to be here today.
Thank you to the Center for American Progress. Visit our website at thisisamerica.net for online video and weekly podcasts. Special thanks to Korean Air and the Korea Tourism Organization. This is America is made possible by Hyundai Motor America, maker of the 2007 Sonata. The National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. The city of Paducah, Kentucky, located in McCracken County, home of the Paducah Artist Relocation Program. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The CTC Foundation. And the American Life TV Network.